Hello everyone, this is Hugo, and today I'm gonna show you how I made this outline for my animated short film. If you're curious, you can watch this video to learn more about my short film. So we're gonna start off with a cube that we of course delete, very important. Now we can add Madame Suzanne. You then go to the top left corner, you add a grease pencil. Now you have multiple options. The three ones that we usually select are either scene line art, collection line art, or object line art. They don't really matter the choice you make, because you can still change them afterwards. So we're gonna select object line art. Now in the modifiers tab, you're gonna see that it selected automatically Suzanne with a few default settings. But you can see that nothing's happening. What you need to have is a camera. So you add your camera, you can go and then in your camera, select the lock and zoom out. Now you see that some lines appeared, right? Now once you select back your line art, you can change the thickness to see it better. And what you can see, is that when I move my camera, it changes as well. So it's camera dependent. If I'm out of my camera and I go there, it's horrible. So make sure to always have a camera when you're working with grease pencil, else it's not gonna work. So now you have different settings that we're gonna go over. So those basic ones are contour with silhouette or individual silhouette. So silhouette basically selects the silhouette, the outer edges of your character or your mesh. But you're gonna see that it selects sometimes other parts of your mesh that you don't want to select. That's because of the intersection checkbox that you're gonna uncheck, and now it's only the silhouette. But for now, we're gonna take it back and put it on contour. We're also gonna make it a bit thinner because it's just smaller lines around the details of the face. Let's make it maybe 0.01. We're gonna see we can always change it later on. We're then gonna add multiple strokes and the subdivide modifier right on top. So the subdivide modifier basically smooths out your lines a little bit. It's not very noticeable, so you can always just not have it if it affects your performance a lot. By the way, if you're animating a character, it might affect your performance by a lot. So what you can do is disable and viewport your line art. For that, go over this menu and select this little computer icon. And then you can deselect it right there. And now with the multiple strokes, you can see that it adds a lot of lines over your character. So you can add even more. I think the maximum is 10. I'll make it 3. And you can make it a bit closer to the original line. So maybe like this, let's say. You can also tweak the fade settings. So you have the center settings, thickness settings, and opacity settings. So if we zoom in, we're gonna see that the center affects which lines, decides which lines are affected more, basically. So if I put it like this, maybe it's those ones here, but then it's the actual contrary at a value of 1. So I like to keep it usually at around 0.8. Then the thickness affects the thickness, as you can see right there. So usually about 0.6, 0.7, something like this. And the opacity affects the overall intensity of the opacity that's being removed from those lines. And we're gonna add the noise modifier. So here you have a lot more settings than what we had with the multiple strokes. Don't be scared. It's not a lot that we need to tweak. So there's the position, which affects the actual like largeness, if you want, of the spacing between those lines. I like to keep it somewhat close, so something like 0.2, 0.15, something like this. Then I change a bit the noise scale, so the bigger it is, the more noise there is. I like to keep it somewhat low, so like 0.05, something like this. Now you can change the offset if you don't like the initial look, or the seed as well. And with the randomness value, there's steps and keyframes. Usually I use steps and I make it 12 because I'm in 24 FPS, and I like to make it change at every 12 frames. Else, if it's at the default of 4, when I play the animation, it updates every 4 frames. If I go frame by frame, you're gonna see at 4 it changes. 8, and so on. So with 12, it's a bit less fast, and it makes it a bit more intentional in my opinion. So now, last thing that we need to add is a generate length modifier. So as you can see, it lengthens your lines. So you have the start and end value, that's pretty important. The lower the start value is, the bigger the spacing between the end and the start is. So you can have lines at 0.05 and lines at 0.1. You can make it a bit longer as well, maybe something like this. And you can randomize those values with a steps of 12 as well. So for this first line art, we're pretty much done. That looks pretty nice for a start. Now to add the silhouette, we're gonna duplicate this line art, so with Shift D, and we're gonna remove all those modifiers, except the line art. To better differentiate it, we're gonna make the thickness a bit bigger. We're gonna deselect the intersections because we want to affect only the silhouette, and we select silhouette, of course. So now what we can do is change the color of your lines. You can duplicate your material right there, and you have two colors, your stroke color and your fill color. Usually I like it to be the same on both sides. So for example, let's make it red like this with a 0.75 saturation, let's say. Something like that is pretty cool, I think. Now you select your color. And what I like to do is have two colors for the silhouette to make it a bit more complex and a bit more interesting. So what you can do is duplicate this line art. Now you're gonna see it does nothing because it's the same settings. So what I like to do is add a second slot of material, duplicate this red material we did, make the saturation bigger, change the value a bit to have a secondary color. And now in the modifiers, we're gonna select this color right there. Of course, you're gonna see only one color because the thickness is the same, so you make it lower. Or if you want the contrary, you can make this modifier first and make this one less thick and this one thicker, depending on the result you want, or you can change basically the material. So now that we have the basics of this silhouette, what we can add is subdivide and then simplify right after. Simplify, basically it does the following thing. It makes it more angular. So if I make it like very crazy, you see that it has like, oops, 3 angles because I have 7 iterations. So the more iterations you have, the less smooth it will look. Personally, I like to keep it at 4 or 3. This one I'll do it at 4 just because why not? I think that's pretty cool. Now what we can add is a noise modifier. Change the position depending on what you want. Maybe that could be cool. Like it depends on what result you want to give. Let's try something at a very crazy position. You change a bit the noise scale to have a bit more randomness, and you change the steps. So what I like to do with the silhouette is make it the double of the steps that I had for this smaller line art. So I select back that and I make it 24. So now if I play this, you're gonna see that it changes every second for the silhouette and every half second for the small one. So that's pretty much it for the tutorial. Let me know if you had any questions. I'm gonna help you out, of course. And if you have any YouTube ideas, YouTube videos you want me to make, let me know in the comments. I'm gonna be glad to make them. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Little side note I forgot to mention, this file is gonna be available for free, so I made a link in the description for you to try it out.